Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy today's episode.
Kai was another unique individual in Lux's heart. When they were alone together, Lux would call her by her real name, Caitlin. Among Lux's lovers, the Rowan priestess was the only one who made Lux feel as if he was corrupting something sacred. Aurora didn't understand it at first, but whenever Lux made love with Kai, there was a vague sense of immorality that would rise in Lux's chest, fanning his desire and lust. The pink-haired beauty was not aware that Lux had a hidden fetish for shrine maidens, nuns, priestesses, and similar holy maidens. It was just one of his youthful fantasies back on Earth. This was something that had accompanied him when his memories returned after Ariel came to visit him. Even so, Lux couldn't help but feel that he was doing something blasphemous by staining the beautiful and sensuous body of a high priestess, who also possessed the celestial maiden physique. A special body constitution that allowed the half-elf to rapidly increase his rank and strength whenever he made love to her. Of course, this act worked both ways. The stronger Lux was, the faster Kai also increased her rank. In fact, Kai was now at the peak of the C rank. Perhaps she would even break through and become a B ranker the next time she made love with Lux. Of course, this wasn't really a bad thing since the gods had already abandoned Elysium. If the gods were still present, they might have already kicked the half-elf's bum for defiling one of their high priestesses and punished him for committing a serious crime of blasphemy against them. Last, but not the least, was Ollie. Ollie was very different from her twin sister, Ari. Lux enjoyed being with her, not for the sake of lovemaking, but because Ollie made him feel special. Simply put, among Lux's lovers, Ollie gave the half-elf something that the rest were unable to give him. It was a love that was similar to a motherly love. She was the voice of reason, someone who would think before she acted, and she was also a very loyal person. Lux felt the most relaxed whenever he was with her. In fact, he would spend almost an hour just lying on her lap or burying his head between her breasts, completely relaxed as she patted his head and hummed him a lullaby. If Iris was his safe haven after a storm, Ollie was a motherly figure who gave Lux unconditional love. This compassionate love with no strings attached was something that he had longed for all his life. Lux was raised by his grandma, Vera, who showered him with love and affection. But in his heart, Vera was his grandma and not his mother. Even in his past life, he didn't experience motherly love because, in his mother's eyes, he was someone who shouldn't have been born. Lux grew up being referred to as a mistake. Perhaps this was also the main reason why he had shut himself off from the world and pursued happiness online by watching Luna's performance and defending her from those who bashed her on the internet. He had always wanted to experience what it was like to be loved by a mother, so the motherly Ollie had filled that void in Lux's heart. Although she was not old enough to be his mother, her touch, gentleness, and the way she affectionately looked at him patched his lonely heart with the love that he was missing in his life. A love that he longed to experience. Of course, Ollie was not aware of this. But even if she was, she wouldn't change the way she treated Lux. Since Aurora shared Ollie's senses, she understood that the handmaiden loved Lux in her own way. For her, Lux was already a part of her family, like her sister, Ari, and her mistress, Valerie. This was why she wanted to treat him with great care. She treated him as someone very precious to her. Ollie didn't really have any experience in love because Lux was her first love. One could even say that she was just starting to open her heart to the person whom she knew she would spend her life with, so her affection came out as a motherly type of love. Lux and Ollie would also spend most of their time talking about random things, like their dreams when they were young, their plans for the future, and the fears inside their hearts. She became Lux's confidant, and he became hers. It was a relationship built on unconditional trust, and Aurora enjoyed every second of it. In fact, similar to Lux, she looked forward when it was Ollie's turn to be with him. Connecting to her made Aurora feel relaxed, and she happily enjoyed the sweet, intimate, and familial love that both of them shared. Their sensual sessions were short and sweet, but that didn't mean that they didn't enjoy it. In fact, they enjoyed it so much that they took a slow and unhurried pace, further savoring the feeling of their connection with each other. These slow lovemaking sessions allowed them to build up their momentum before finding their sweet release while holding each other in a loving embrace. Their intimate moments weren't like the rough and passionate rounds that Lux had with Ari or the immoral lovemaking he felt when making love with Kai. It was lovely and sweet, sweet enough to rot Aurora's teeth. After experiencing these many ways of love, Aurora wondered if she would be able to give Lux a unique experience, one that he had never felt before with his other lovers. Deep in her heart, she wished for that to happen, something that only belonged to her, and something that Lux would find irresistible, something that would make him crave for her skinship, allowing her to monopolize him, and make the time they spent with each other special and memorable. Just as Aurora was lost in her thoughts, she felt someone lightly tapping her shoulder. The young lady's gaze landed on the little skeleton, Zane, who was pointing at Zeke. Aurora then shifted her gaze to look in the direction of the table and Zeke, who was holding a tray of warm food for her to eat. "Do you want me to eat first?" Aurora asked Zane with a smile. Zane shook his head and pointed to the bathroom. He then made chattering noises with his mouth, making the young lady nod her head in understanding. "Thank you for preparing the bath for me," Aurora said softly. "I'll wash myself first then eat." Zane nodded and helped Aurora to stand up. The two little skeletons had somehow become her nannies, taking care of her needs. They made sure that Aurora ate, bathed, and slept on time. Zane and Zeke would even assist her when she put on her dresses and would also brush her hair. They would even hug her to sleep at night so that she wouldn't have any nightmares. If Lux was the person Aurora loved the most, Zane and Zeke held second place in her heart. They had become her companions in the darkness of her prison while she waited for the half-elf's arrival. Aurora smiled as she walked towards the bathroom to clean her body properly. After that, she ate the meal that Zeke had brought from the kitchen with gusto. Her appetite had increased after experiencing Lux's lovemaking sessions. While she was busy eating, Zane and Zeke went to change her bedding and replaced it with a fresh set. The two little skeletons knew that in another hour or two, Lux would visit one of his lovers, which would make their mistress feel hot and bothered all over again. The days passed by swiftly, and although he was reluctant to part with his lovers, Lux understood that it was already time to leave. Fortunately, all of his women were now members of his guild, allowing them to teleport to his guild headquarters anytime they wanted. When Aina, Valerie, Ali, and Ari realized that Lux's guild was actually the one and only mythical guild in the world, all of them were pleasantly surprised. Of course, Lux didn't forget to ask them to keep this matter a secret for now because aside from his guild members and a handful of people, like the Dragon King and the steward of the Crystal Palace, the rest of the world had no idea that he was the guild master of Heaven's Gate. Since the meeting will be held in Karshvar Draconis, let us all teleport to the guild headquarters first, Hearswith, who had returned only a day before the meeting would start, said with a smile. She used the days she was away to double-check the current status of the kingdoms that her grand disciple had subjugated. To her surprise, the citizens of these kingdoms had already returned to their daily routine. The royal families also moved fast and executed Lux's orders, cleansing their territories from corrupt officials through exile, improving the government's efficiency. Since Lux didn't attack the common people and instead directly went for their kingdom's rulers and powerhouses like high-rankers and saints, the common folk didn't hold a grudge against him. The Adventurers Guild also didn't suffer a single loss when he visited, so he wasn't treated as an internationally wanted criminal. Hearswith also found out that after the ceasefire agreement was in place, the Lizard King and a few of his men returned to the marshlands to see if their people could return to their homes. However, after seeing that their cities were destroyed and the land was steeped in poison, they understood that it was impossible for them to return to their homeland. This made the Lizard King very depressed, but there was nothing he could do about it. Once upon a time, he could have easily pinched the half-elf and ended his life easily. But now, he didn't dare to face Lux because he knew that if they fought against each other, the one who would meet his end would be him. To this day, the Dragon King, the Elf King, the Steward of the Crystal Palace, the Beast King, the Lizard King, the Divine Army, and the other powerhouses that ruled the central regions of Elysium still didn't know where Lux was able to get his army, which was composed of hundreds of calamity-rank monsters. Had they been ordinary calamity monsters, they might have still stood a chance, but they were not. All of them were extremely strong. And the worst part of it all was that they were all imbued with Aurora's aura of misfortune, which only affected their enemies. Such an army was very hard to face head-on, and even the Supremes of Elysium didn't want to mess with them. Of course, the SSS-ranked kingdoms were capable of fighting against Lux's army since they possessed powerful artifacts that were only a few levels weaker than the Pillars of Eternity. But they were only supposed to use these artifacts as a last resort when their kingdom was in peril. Lux had a good relationship with these kingdoms, and he had no intention of attacking them. This was also why the Dragon King agreed to let the meeting take place in his kingdom, since he could pull off taking the role of a mediator between Lux and the Divine Army. Are you really going to meet up with the Sovereign and the founder of the Divine Army? Valerie asked in a worried tone. Yes, Lux replied. You be careful, said. They might pull a fast one on you. All of his lovers expressed their concerns, and Lux did his best to assure them that everything was going to be fine. Truth be told, he didn't trust the Sovereign and the founder of the Divine Army. He had already prepared countermeasures to ensure his safety during their meeting. Let's go, Lux said as he held Iris and Kai's hands. His other lovers held each other's hands, forming a circle. A moment later, all of them turned into beams of light and shot towards the sky. Their destination was none other than Lux's guild headquarters, which was currently within the territory of the Crystal Palace. Upon arrival, the first thing that Lux did was call Emma and Gerhardt to ask them about the current situation of their guild. The two reported that the project that Lux had left them was going smoothly and that he had nothing to worry about. The construction of the town was almost done and, according to Bentley, they would only need 1 more month to finish everything. Lux was quite happy after hearing their report and asked them to continue managing the guild while he was away. Since the meeting would be held the next day, Lux's lovers decided to stay with him for 1 more day. The half-elf readily agreed, and all of them spent the day inside the guild headquarters, simply enjoying each other's company. They had already made love more times than they could count in the past few days, so they decided to temporarily abstain from worldly pleasures and just relax and enjoy their time together. This made Aurora breathe a sigh of relief in her heart because, truth be told, she was already having a hard time standing properly, and her legs had almost turned into jelly. She was the one who had indirectly made love with Lux the most. Aurora had a feeling that if she experienced 1 more day of those lovemaking sessions, she would probably lose consciousness for a few days, which would allow her body to heal and recover. Somewhere in Elysium. As expected, the gates are starting to become more and more active as the days pass, the Sovereign muttered as he observed an ancient abyssal gate that was nearly 10 meters tall. The Divine Army had been searching for these hidden gates within Elysium that the abyssal creatures had built during their invasion in the past. Their goal was to destroy it and prevent the monsters from using it to cross over to their world. This was also the main reason why they decided to compromise with the half-elf. They simply couldn't spare manpower to deal with him at the moment. They had already lost almost all of their supporters, so they were only using the main bulk of their army to find these scattered gates that had been hidden well by their enemies. The Sovereign casually waved his hand, and the 10-meter-tall abyssal gate disintegrated until nothing was left. He then left the scene to return to their underground headquarters. They would be meeting the half-elf in a few hours, and he wanted this to be done and over with so that they could continue their mission. On the other side of the continent, the members of Memento Mori were doing the same as they continued their search for the Stars of Calamity. They would also destroy every abyssal gate they came across. Unlike the Divine Army, who had lost most of their manpower, the Necromancers didn't lack it. Summoning their undead to act as scouting parties, they effectively found these well-hidden abyssal gates. Gates which would have remained undetected if not for the fact that the undead had a peculiar way of detecting the corruption of the abyss. Hirswith only became aware of these activities after returning to Memento Mori. This was also why she decided to accept the compromise of the Divine Army. The beautiful Necromancer of Heaven was able to see the bigger picture. Although she still hated the Divine Army for causing the death of her disciple, she understood that the threat of the abyssal invasion should be prioritized for the time being. The powers of the world were also moving in the background and helping these two opposing organizations destroy the abyssal gates in their respective territories. But despite their success in weeding out these potential threats, they knew, with absolute certainty, that these preventive measures would not be enough to stop another invasion from happening. An invasion that would be happening very soon, encouraging everyone to build up their armies so they would be able to defend their world against the second coming of the invaders that came from another dimension. Within the royal palace of Karshvar Draconis, inside a conference room, several people were currently seated facing each other. The Dragon King and the steward of the Crystal Palace sat in the middle. They were the mediators and arbiters of this meeting. Hearswith and Lux were sitting on their right side, while the sovereign and the founder of the Divine Army sat on their left. There were also a few guests present, namely the Elf King, Casimir, the Lizard King, and some neutral parties who were invited to serve as the witnesses of this ceasefire agreement. "Let's get this over with," the sovereign said as he tossed a storage ring toward Lux, which the latter caught with his right hand. "That is the compensation we'll give you in exchange for your agreement to this ceasefire agreement. Also, we are willing to sign a non-aggression pact with you that will last for 5 years. In those 5 years, the Divine Army, as well as our allies, will not harm a single hair on your body. Of course, this agreement also includes the people that are close to you. However, since we do not know the identity of these people, you must provide us with names to ensure that no accidents will happen in the future. Do we have an agreement?" "Why not?" Lux replied with a smile. 5 years is good. That is enough time for me to tie up some loose ends on my part. The world of Solais only had a few years before it was destroyed, so having a 5-year ceasefire agreement was also beneficial to him. But there was one thing that Lux didn't want to agree with, and that was giving out the names of the people important to him. Who knew what the Divine Army would do with this information? He didn't feel safe listing the names of his lovers, lest his enemies use them against him. "There is just one thing that we need to revise in the contract," Lux stated. "It is about the part where I list the names of the people that are part of my faction." "Don't be unreasonable," the founder of the Divine Army interjected. "How will we be able to know if they're your people or not?" "Well, that's simple," Lux replied. "If they are my people, they will tell you guys that they are my people." "Huh? Are you joking with us?" the sovereign of the Divine Army asked. "You want us to believe that anyone that tells us that they are related to you is your people?" "Yes," Lux nodded. "How absurd," the founder stated. "You can't expect us to agree to this." "Well, if you don't want to agree to it, then that's fine." Lux shrugged. "We will just continue our war then." The corner of the sovereign and the founder's lips twitched after hearing Lux's reply. Their world was on the verge of being invaded by abyssal monsters, and this half-elf still wanted to find them to look for trouble? How unreasonable. "Look here, brat," the founder said with a solemn expression on his face. "We don't have time to deal with you because we are busy trying to protect our world from an abyssal invasion, so don't push us. You are busy trying to deal with an abyssal invasion, yet you still have time to potentially antagonize me and my people?" Lux asked back with a sneer. "If that isn't called stupidity, then I don't know what is." The founder of the Divine Army was at a loss for words. They could tell that Lux was adamant about not cooperating with them, which they found annoying. Taking a deep breath, the sovereign of the Divine Army spoke once more. "Okay, so you are saying that if we are to find people that are getting in our way, we can't deal with them if they say that they are your people?" the sovereign asked. "Yes," Lux replied. "And what if they are just pretending to know you?" the founder asked. "What if they have ill intentions and just want to prevent us from doing what we must do? If we meet a group of bandits and they tell us that they know you, should we just let them go? Is that what you are saying?" Lux shook his head. "You're making things complicated." "No," the sovereign snorted. "You are the one who is making this complicated. We are just asking for a list of names so that we won't accidentally harm your people, but you refuse to provide it. Who is being unreasonable here?" Lux smirked. "Like I said, you are just making things complicated. First and foremost, the only people who are aware of this agreement are the people inside this room. Our guests and our mediators have signed a contract of silence, preventing them from spreading the things that we talked about in this meeting. Since that is the case, it is nearly impossible for anyone to know that your people are unable to touch them as long as they mention that they are part of my faction. Or are you saying that the two of you will divulge our meeting to others? If so, you are the ones who will be shooting yourselves in the foot." The sovereign and the founder of the divine army glanced at each other because what Lux was saying was correct. If no one inside the room spread the contents of their meeting, the chances of people using Lux's name to save themselves from the divine army were nearly non-existent. "Fine," the sovereign relented. "However, you are also not allowed to get in our way." "Good, but I would also like to add one more condition to the ceasefire agreement," Lux stated. "What is it?" the founder snapped. "I want to borrow the Pillar of Eternity that belongs to your organization for 2 days," Lux replied. "What did you say?" The sovereign of the divine army narrowed his eyes. "How did you know about the Pillar of Eternity?" "My Grandmaster told me," Lux replied in an innocent tone. "Isn't that right, Grandmaster?" "Yes, that's right," Hearswith replied. "I did tell him that you old toads have one of the Pillars of Eternity in your possession." The sovereign scoffed. "This is unacceptable. How can we possibly agree to let you borrow the treasure of our organization? Okay, how about this?" Lux decided to take a step back in order to diffuse the tension in the room. "I won't borrow it. However, when I ask you to bring it out, you will bring it with you." "And why should we do that?" the founder asked. The Pillar of Eternity in their possession had the power to unlock the hidden potential of a person. However, the Divine Army took a different approach in using it, forcefully allowing apostles to gain the power of pseudo-supremes in order to fight against the Abyssal Army. "It's because I am also gathering the Pillars of Eternity," Lux replied. "Once I obtain the other 4 pillars, I want the Divine Army to cooperate with me in order to activate the true power of the pillars, once they are gathered together." Lux's reply alarmed everyone inside the room. All of them were aware that the Pillars of Eternity were more than just divine artifacts, holding powers that no mere mortal would be able to wield by themselves. "Are you trying to become a god?" the sovereign of the divine army asked. "Is this why you are gathering the Pillars of Eternity?" Lux shook his head. He knew that if he didn't tell everyone inside the conference the true reason for trying to gather all 5 pillars together, they would think that he wanted to ascend to godhood and rule over the entirety of Elysium. "The majority of the people here are supremes, so you should be able to tell if I were lying or not," Lux stated. "My reason for trying to gather all 5 pillars is to save my home world. When the Abyss tried to invade Solais, the 100-Year War started, which mostly destroyed the lands of my world. The majority of the lands are now covered in miasma, and this miasma is spreading at a rapid rate. Soon, it will cover our entire world, killing everything in it. In order to prevent that and restore the world to its former glory, I will need the 5 pillars of eternity. Since I am about to sign a non-aggression pact with you, I cannot forcefully take the divine artifact from your hands. But if you refuse to cooperate with me, I will also not sign this agreement. My home world is dying, so I can't take any chances. Either you agree to let me borrow the Pillar of Eternity in your possession, or I take it by force once I gather the other 4 pillars. So, what is your decision? Do we all agree to help each other, or do we all agree to backstab each other after the abyssal invasion has come to pass?" "Pass?" The sovereign and the founder of the divine army looked at Lux with serious expressions on their faces. Of course, they knew that the Solaians were looking for ways to save their world when they entered Elysium. They were artifacts that were made by the gods themselves. Some of them had even migrated for good, building their own kingdoms, just like Aina's parents had done when they founded the Xeno kingdom. If the Solaians were truly forced to migrate to their world, another round of huge-scale conflict might take place, with the original inhabitants and the foreigners fighting each other for every piece of land on the planet. This was bound to be a bloody battle, and it was something that every faction inside the conference room would like to avoid if possible. In the end, the sovereign and the founder of the divine army relented and agreed to let Lux borrow their artifact. However, the half-elf could only take it once he had gathered the other 4 pillars of eternity. Lux agreed to this condition, and with everyone inside the conference room as witnesses, both parties signed the non-aggression pact, bringing a temporary end to the grudge between the 2 parties. After the contract had been signed, Lux returned to his guild headquarters and informed his guild members about the outcome of the meeting. For a period of time, peace returned to Elysium as all the factions prepared for their upcoming war against the forces of the Abyss. Lux, Kai, Keen, Gerhardt, and Cephas were currently in Leaf Town, talking to Grandma Annie, who had just finished her session of pill-making. I didn't expect such a thing to happen, Grandma Annie sighed after hearing Lux's story. Sid's little sisters, Laura and Livia, sat beside Grandma Annie and patted their baby slimes, Cora and Nora, with smiles on their faces. So, what are you planning to do now? Grandma Annie asked. Did you come to Leaf Town because you still have some unfinished business? Lux nodded. You can say that, Grandma Annie. I am here for revenge. Revenge? Grandma Annie frowned. Ah, you were talking about them. Right. Lux smirked. I am talking about them. There was one organization that had made Lux's life very difficult in the kingdom of Guelevin. It was none other than Twilight Rain, the Dark Guild who had sent assassins to kill him when he was still an apostle. They also made things difficult for Aina and Colette, which was one of the reasons why he vowed to deal with them. Right now, his conflict with the Divine Army was temporarily put on hold, allowing him to focus his attention on some unfinished business. Kai and Keen, who were once captured by Twilight Rain, along with Princess Anastasia, in the past, decided to accompany the half-elf after finding out that he was going to deal with Twilight Rain once and for all. Gerhardt and Cephas also volunteered to accompany Lux, unsatisfied that they had not been able to help him deal with the Divine Army of Light. Now that there was an opportunity to test their newly gained strength, all of them were itching for a fight. Surprisingly, among the companions who were currently with him, Kai was the strongest. She was in her boar form, like always, and had become a beer anchor. The reason for her fast rise in ranks was due to her special physique. After making love with Lux for the past few days, she had finally beaten everyone in rank, surpassing even Iris, who was nearing the peak of being a sea ranker. If I see that ranker who captured me in the past, I'll show him who's boss, Kai snorted. Lux, leave that guy to me, okay? I'll stomp his face to oblivion. Whenever Kai took on her boar form, her intelligence regressed quite a bit, making her very talkative and very active. Okay. Lux nodded. You can have him. Cephas, who had just finished eating his snacks and tea, looked at the half-elf with a frown. Then, what are we waiting for? Cephas asked. Let's deal with those guys right away. I am itching to test my new abilities on them. Calm down, Lux answered. We still have to wait for Sid and Cadmus, Draconic Kobold, to return. Sid was now a beer anchor, while Cadmus had become a peak dreadnought rank alpha monster. Back then, this Draconic Kobold wished to crush Lux in order to avenge his clan members. However, after entering Kyoza's domain, the Kobolds had allied themselves with Lux and became the pillars of his guild. Perhaps, if Emma weren't too busy handling the affairs of the guild, she would have joined Lux on this cleaning up operation. She was one of the adventurers who had been captured by Twilight Rain and was turned into a Leakin against her own will. If it weren't for Lux saving her, she might have died as one of the cannon fodders under Twilight Rain's command, and the half-elf might never have gained a very capable secretary who competently handled the affairs of Heaven's Gate, alongside General Garrett. Fortunately, Sid and Cadmus arrived in Leaf Town after 3 hours. Both of them were helping the expedition party advance in the Savage Lands as they explored this new frontier. They were the leaders of the Leaf Town delegation, so they were unable to leave their members behind right away. After receiving Lux's message, the two decided to escort their members to the outpost within the Savage Lands before returning to Leaf Town with haste. Now that they had arrived, Lux told them to rest for an hour before they headed to the stronghold of Noria. He needed to talk to Commander Thoram and ask him to send word to the capital that he was going to visit. The commander of the stronghold of Noria had direct contact with Nevriel, who was Robin's caretaker. Nevriel was also the pitiful dwarf that Lux had extorted to help build his guild headquarters when he was still lacking funds. What do you want? Nevriel asked through the round mirror that Commander Thoram was holding. Lux could tell that the middle-aged dwarf was quite annoyed just by hearing the tone of the other party's voice. Did something happen? Lux asked. Why so moody? You brat. You've been away from the kingdom for so long that you are not aware that we have already started a war against Twilight Reign, Nevriel stated. Of course, the populace doesn't know anything about a war taking place since their headquarters we're attacking are hidden on the outskirts of several cities. Their forces are stronger than we thought, and both sides have already suffered significant losses. I am currently on my way to visit the king in order to receive his orders. Lux was quite surprised that the kingdom of Guelevin had finally taken that step to fight the hidden danger that was slowly building up their forces in order to overthrow the royal family. Perfect timing, Lux said with a smile. How about I help you guys deal with those bastards? You know that I have a grudge against them, right? Nevriel frowned after hearing Lux's words. However, he also understood that the half-elf had been on the receiving end of Twilight Reign's bullying in the past. Are you sure that you can deal with them? Nevriel asked. This is not a game, Lux. This is an all-out war. You can easily die when you join this battle. Don't worry, Sir Nevriel, Lux replied. I promise I won't get in your way. Can I also talk to His Majesty? There are a few things that I want to ask him. Nevriel pondered for a bit before nodding his head. Lux was recognized as the benefactor of the kingdom of Guelevin after he saved Princess Anastasia from the members of Twilight Reign. Because of this, the royal family had a good impression of him. Very well. Head to the capital as soon as you can, Nevriel said. I will talk to His Majesty and inform him of your arrival. After gaining Nevriel's assurance, Lux used the teleportation gate of the stronghold of Noria. Truth be told, he also wanted to see Millie and Princess Anastasia, who had turned 16 years old a few months ago. They were the two people who had survived alongside him in the Wolf Pine Barony, where they met Teju Jagwa and the member of Memento Mori for the first time. He didn't know when he could return to the capital city of the Kingdom of Guelevin after he had gotten his revenge on Twilight Reign. So, he planned to use this opportunity to see whether his two friends were doing well before joining the battle that was being waged in places the common folk of the kingdom wouldn't see. Sir Lux? An adorable dwarf jumped toward Lux as soon as she saw the half-elf walking down one of the hallways of the royal palace. The half-elf didn't hesitate to catch Princess Anastasia, whom he hadn't seen for quite a while. A princess shouldn't jump at her father's guest as soon as she sees them, Lux said before lightly patting the head of the little dwarf who had clung to him like a koala. Be mindful of your surroundings, and don't act in this manner if you are in a place with many people. The reason why I did this is because there are no people around. Princess Anastasia pouted. Can't you see that the hallway is deserted? I made sure that no one would interrupt my reunion with you, Sir Lux. Millie and Megan, who were Princess Anastasia's two protectors, couldn't help but cover their faces in embarrassment. They were the people who responsibly instructed the maids and guards to steer clear of this particular hallway, knowing that something might happen when they personally welcomed Lux's arrival. The two were right, but they just didn't expect their princess to act in a way that was unbecoming of a member of the royal family. Fortunately, we made sure that no one would be around this hallway, Millie thought. If not, this would become the greatest scandal of this kingdom. Millie knew that Princess Anastasia had liked Lux ever since the half-elf had rescued her from the members of Twilight Reign. However, she also understood that this might just be the princess puppy love phase, which would disappear as she grew older. Millie thought that the longer the princess didn't see Lux, the faster her feelings for him would disappear. But what she didn't know was that the princess was only bottling up her feelings during the times when she couldn't meet her savior. Ha! You smell good, Sir Lux. Princess Anastasia buried her head in Lux's chest and sighed in happiness. I wish I could stay like this forever. Keen, Gerhardt, and Cephas looked at the red-headed teenager with complicated looks on their faces. Are we going to meet the king or not? Kai lightly nudged Lux, who was still patting the head of the little dwarf, who had no intention of letting him go. We will meet with the king, Lux replied. Princess, please calm down so that I can meet your father. I need to talk to him about something very important. Is this about Twilight Reign? Princess Anastasia asked in a heartbeat. Are you going to join the battle? Lux nodded. That's the reason why I am here. Princess Anastasia sighed in her heart and reluctantly let go of the half-elf. However, she wanted to stay with him a bit longer, so she held his hand and pulled him towards the throne room with a smile. It seems that you still know what to prioritize, Princess, Kai commented as she walked beside Lux. Of course, Princess Anastasia replied. Since Sir Lux has come here to help our kingdom defeat that terrorist organization, I will not get in his way. The faster they get destroyed, the better. It seems that you still carry a grudge since the kidnapping incident, Kai commented. Of course, Princess Anastasia smirked. I've had a hard time sleeping peacefully knowing that my kidnappers are still at large. How about you? Do you still carry a grudge as well? I do, Kai answered, and this time, I will repay them in full. The two smiled evilly at each other. Both of them agreed that Twilight Rain didn't need to exist in the kingdom of Guelevin. A few minutes later, they arrived at the gates of the throne room. Princess Anastasia reluctantly let go of the half-elf's hand and fixed her dress to ensure that she would look presentable in front of her father. Once she was sure that she had smoothed out the wrinkles in her dress, she nodded at Millie and Megan, who pushed the doors open. Princess Anastasia entered the throne room with the grace and dignity befitting a member of the royal family. Your Majesty, I have brought our guest, Princess Anastasia announced, making her father smile. You did well, Anastasia, King Uther von Guelevin said with a smile. It has been a while, Lux. I hope that you're doing well. I am well, Your Majesty. Lux gave King Uther a respectful bow. Although he had the power to single-handedly trample the kingdom of Guelevin if he wanted to, the dwarven royal family had done many good things for him in the past. Since that was the case, he would give them the respect they deserved as one of the kingdoms, which Lux was very fond of. I can tell that you have grown stronger as well. King Uther nodded his head in satisfaction. The dwarven king was a saint, so he could easily gauge Lux's rank with a single glance. However, something was telling him that, despite the half-elf's rank being lower than his, the young man was more dangerous than him. This feeling surprised him, but he was old enough to believe what his gut instinct was telling him. Nevriel told me that you wish to join the war against Twilight Rain, King Uther said. Do you want the latest information about the battle? Yes, Your Majesty, Lux replied. I want to know everything about them. King Uther nodded and explained that the all-out war was heating up. They had discovered the main headquarters of Twilight Rain, which was located deep underground. However, their enemies had plenty of tricks up their sleeves, including an army of mutated monsters, which seemed to be under their control. After the most recent clash, our forces have made a strategic retreat a mile away from their main headquarters, King Uther explained. The battle is taking place at the base of Mount Forberg on the northern edge of the kingdom. According to our reports, the monsters were at the peak of the Empyrean rank. The members of the Order are keeping them at bay for the time being. Our two saints are also on standby and ready to assist. The only reason why they still hadn't made their move is because they are wary of the saints of Twilight Rain. According to our information, Twilight Rain has two saints among their ranks, which includes their leader. Of course, there is a possibility that they have more than two saints. Knowing this, I have sent more reinforcements to the battlefield. Nevriel will be departing shortly, so if you would like, you can go with him to reach your destination faster. Lux nodded and gratefully accepted King Uther's suggestion. If it was him a year ago, he might have been worried that their enemies had several saints among their ranks. But now, Lux no longer cared how many saints there were. In fact, he even wished they had more. The more saints they had, the more subordinates he could obtain. He also wanted to make the guild master of Twilight Rain regret the day that he had targeted Lux. Kai and Princess Anastasia were not the only ones who liked to carry a grudge. Lux was just as petty as them. After talking for nearly half an hour, the half-elf joined Nevriel's army. They wouldn't be traveling on foot. Instead, they would use the one-way teleportation gate that they especially constructed in preparation for this all-out battle against Twilight Rain. Truth be told, Nevriel was worried that Lux might be killed when the Saints of Twilight Rain finally joined the battle. He wasn't aware that the half-elf, who had an evil grin plastered on his face, would be the key that would end the 3-decade-long conflict between Twilight Rain and the Kingdom of Guelevin once and for all. Twilight Rain Underground Base. To think that they managed to push us this far, Harris, who had been the leader of the operation to kidnap Princess Anastasia, solemnly muttered. But I think this is for the best. From here on out, it will be a battle of attrition. All our forces are gathered here, so it is possible for us to turn this situation in our favor. After failing his mission, the brawler focused on strengthening himself. With consistent hard work and dedication, he managed to become an A ranker, allowing him to regain a bit of his reputation. "You're right, Harris," the guildmaster of Twilight Reign, ManhwaRecap, commented. "Perhaps this is a turning point for us. As long as we decimate their high rankers in this battle, we will be able to march towards the capital with ease." Magnar was the current Dwarf King's uncle. He had long been planning to usurp his nephew's throne and become the king of the kingdom of Gwellivan. He had been biding his time and laying the groundwork for his rebellion. But for some reason, something would always happen that would force him and his organization to take a step back each time. Their Leakin project was discovered too early, and all of the people working on the project were killed, losing the results of their research in the process. Targeting Aina, who had also played a role in cleaning up some of their bases in the towns and cities of the kingdom, also failed. Then the Battle of Whitebridge City took place. Although the head of the Merchant Guild of Whitebridge City, Lucius, managed to survive, everything continued to go downhill from there. To make matters worse, his top executives, as well as the leaders of the different merchant guilds, who served as his spies and logistic managers, were assassinated one by one. This forced their expansion to be put on hold until they captured the assassin responsible for killing their supporters. For all of this to happen, there could only be one explanation. There was a mole inside their organization, leaking valuable information to their enemies. Magnar did everything, but he was unable to determine who the spy was, which was perfectly normal. Twilight Reign was an organization that had tens of thousands of members that spanned the entirety of the kingdom of Gwellivan. Although Magnar was a saint, he wasn't an all-knowing saint. He wasn't aware that Lux had planted not just one, but 4 spies inside his organization. 2 assassins and 2 merchants. They kept Lux updated about the movements of Twilight Reign. In fact, it was Scarlet who told the half-elf that the kingdom of Gwellivan had started to take aggressive actions toward their guild. Unfortunately, during that time, Lux was busy giving the allies of the Divine Army a visit, so he didn't have time to pay attention to the situation in the Dwarf Kingdom. Now that he was free from dealing with the Divine Army, he could shift his attention to his old enemies, who had no idea who was about to knock on their doorstep. "Fortify the hidden entrances of our headquarters," Magnar ordered. "We have the territorial advantage. If they want to fight us, they will have to enter a slaughterhouse first. We will make sure that they regret bringing the battle to our main headquarters."
Yes.
The elders and executives of Twilight Reign left the conference room to carry out Magnar's orders. When everyone had left the conference room, 3 dwarves wearing dark robes appeared in front of Magnar. "I have confirmed that the enemy has 2 saints in their army," one of the black-robed dwarves said. "Must we really wait until they come to us? Why don't we just go to them instead?" "What's the fun of doing that?" Magnar asked. "If we make your presence known, that nephew of mine in the capital will be alerted. Who knows what he will do? It is highly likely that he will seek the help of the neighboring kingdoms. If their saints join this battle too early, the outcome will be difficult to predict. So our best course of action is to let them enter our domain. Once inside, they will not know what hit them. Also, there will be no witnesses to report anything back to the capital." Magnar smiled evilly as he looked at the 3 individuals in front of him. These 3 dwarves were his secret weapons, and all of them were saints. With him added to the mix, Twilight Reign had a total of 4 saints, which was already enough to take over the kingdom if they used a blitzkrieg attack. But they didn't choose this option. Instead, they wanted to eliminate the 2 saints first before making a beeline to the capital of the kingdom. If they took King Uther by surprise, the fate of the royal family would be sealed, and Magnar would become the new king of the kingdom of Gwellivan. While the guild master of Twilight Reign was discussing strategy with his trump cards, the kingdom of Gwellivan had restarted their offensive against Twilight Reign. At one of the hidden entrances of Twilight Reign's main headquarters, "Man, I hope that we finally get some action soon," a dwarf said as he sharpened his axe. "I'm looking forward to killing some people." "True," another dwarf agreed. "The guild master has raised the bounty on every enemy's head. 1,000 gold for initiates, 10,000 gold for low rankers, and 1,000,000 gold coins for high rankers. A very profitable business, don't you think? Indeed, very profitable. Huh. I hope we get some action soon. Suddenly, the gate they were guarding exploded, alerting the members of Twilight Reign. A moment later, a boar entered the gate, followed by a dragonborn. Come out, Twilight Reign, Kai shouted. I have come here to stomp on your faces. Filthy lowlanders, I, Cephas, have come to destroy all of you, Cephas declared. If you don't want to die, all of you should kneel and beg for my forgiveness. This is the only option that you have to survive my wrath. The two troublemakers were very confident that they could overpower their opponents because they had become stronger than before. They even started to laugh maniacally as a way to intimidate their opponents. However, when the two noticed that they were facing dozens of high rankers, all of whom had their weapons drawn, both of them almost choked on their laughter. Bastards! We didn't come here to fight high rankers. Cephas shouted in anger. Bring out your initiates and low rankers. Fight us fair and square. Juniors, you dare? We only bully the weak and fear the strong, Kai declared. We are only here to fight the cannon fodders. Bring out your apostles so I can step on them with my hoof. Keen and Gerhardt, who had also entered the gate last, couldn't help but facepalm after hearing the two troublemakers' demands. Enough nonsense, one of the high rankers shouted. Kill them. Just as Kai and Cephas were about to run away due to the difference in ranks, their enemies suddenly felt a strong pressure descend on their bodies, holding them in place. The two troublemakers then glanced at the two beautiful saintesses who were standing behind their backs, paralyzing their enemies with their powerful presence. They were none other than the Saintess, Cleo, and the Oracle, Maeve. Lux had asked them to watch over Kai and the others and ensure that none of them got hurt. Seeing that two powerful saints had arrived to back them up, Kai and Cephas glanced at each other before laughing out loud. You only brought out high rankers to deal with us? Filthy lowlanders, Cephas sneered. Simply courting death. I expected more from Twilight Reign, Kai raised her chin in arrogance. But it looks like I expected too much. I came here to fight strong opponents and not weaklings. However, since you still dare to stand in my way, then eat my hoof. I am charging. Kai no longer hesitated and charged at the high rankers, who couldn't even lift a finger due to the pressure that was holding them in place. Cephas took advantage of their situation as well and immediately unleashed his gravity domain, further adding to their opponent's suffering. The two troublemakers then began to one-sidedly bash, punch, stomp, kick, headbutt, and body slammed their unmoving targets with disdainful looks on their faces. They were like two masters who felt contempt for having to fight against ants who didn't know their place in the world. Keen and Gerhardt didn't join the battle and simply crossed their arms over their chest. Clearly, they didn't want to participate in this farce and simply allowed Kai and Cephas to bully the high rankers, who had no choice but to accept their pitiful fate. Are you sure your friends are going to be safe? Nevriel asked Lux, who had accompanied him to infiltrate the main headquarters of Twilight Reign through a different entrance. Don't worry, Lux replied. They are in good hands. Well, if you say so. Nevriel shrugged as he and his men continued to travel deeper into the hidden passage. A moment later, the middle-aged dwarf suddenly stomped his foot on the ground, forming a wall of earth in front of him. Several bolts, coated with poison, slammed on the earth wall that Nevriel had summoned at the last moment. Lux, who had also noticed the bolts, didn't do anything because he wanted to see just what Nevriel was capable of. Similar to Lux, the middle-aged dwarf was now an A-ranker. A-rankers, S-rankers, and SS rankers all fell under the category of high rankers. These were the people who had the possibility of becoming saints. However, the majority of them would get stuck at this level for the rest of their lives. Nevriel was one of those people. With his age, the highest rank he could reach was S rank. That was his limit, and he would never become a saint unless he got the support of the Kingdom of Guelevin, allowing him to advance in rank by fighting strong monsters with a team and consuming their beast cores. Prepare for battle, Nevriel shouted as he charged forward while reinforcing the earth wall in front of him, treating it as a portable shield that he could use to ram his enemies. The members of Twilight Reign deemed that ambushing them in the narrow passage was no longer possible due to Nevriel's strategy. Aware of this, all of them retreated until they arrived in a spacious cavern. They then positioned themselves in preparation to attack the incoming group from every direction. They waited and waited and waited until they felt that something was wrong. Just as they were wondering if their opponent was going to charge out of the passage or not, they heard the sound of footsteps. Half a minute later, Asmodeus emerged from the passageway and walked inside the spacious cavern as if he were just taking a stroll in the park. "Well then, time to clean this up," Asmodeus said before clapping his hand. Immediately, his two loyal subordinates, Morpheus, Death Tyrant, and Ithaqua, appeared beside him. A blizzard materialized inside the cavern, catching the hundreds of initiates and rankers by surprise. Visibility had suddenly plunged to zero, and at that exact moment, a vile laughter that gave everyone goosebumps reached their ears. Morpheus, who could perfectly see through the blizzard, unleashed a barrage of death rays at their opponents. Ithaqua also didn't hesitate to grab and shred anything within its range. Diablo, Ishtar, and Lazarus also joined the fray, quickly decimating their enemies with chilling efficiency. A minute later, the blizzard disappeared. Nevriel and his men could only look at the aftermath of the battle with solemn expressions on their faces. "You've gotten stronger since the last time I saw you," Nevriel said to Lux, who had his arms crossed over his chest. "Oh, you've seen nothing yet," Lux replied with a smile. Clearly, this was nowhere near the extent of what he was capable of. Truth be told, he could have ended Twilight Reign by himself. However, he decided to hold himself back. For the dwarves, this battle held great significance. In short, this was their battle. As an outsider, he was allowed to help. But at the end of the day, the ones who should settle this battle were the dwarves themselves. He could tell through Nevriel's demeanor and body language that regardless of how many of his men died today, they would put an end to Twilight Reign's reign of terror once and for all. Advancing through the underground tunnels, Nevriel's group finally arrived at an underground city. At the rear of this city was a castle made up of dark stone. This was the castle of Twilight Reign, where their guild master, Magner, was staying. "For you to be able to arrive here is truly commendable, Nevriel," Magner said as he looked at the dwarven army. "But you have pushed your luck too far. Before this day ends, this place will become your tomb." "Oh, really?" Nevriel sneered before throwing a magic scroll to the ground. "The only one dying today is you." The magic scroll that had been thrown burst into flames, creating a golden magic circle on the ground. A moment later, two dwarves materialized in front of everyone. They were the two saints, whom the elf king had sent to eliminate his uncle, who had repeatedly tried to overthrow his rule. "This battle ends here, Magner," one of the saints stated. "If you don't want to die, surrender yourself peacefully." "Very funny," Magner chuckled. "I guess it's time for all of you to understand that you have made a big mistake by coming here." The guild master of Twilight Reign snapped his fingers, and three black-robed individuals appeared beside him. "Kill," Magner ordered. Immediately, he and the three other saints flew towards Nevriel's forces in order to start a massacre. The two saints, who belonged to the kingdom of Guelevin, immediately understood that they had miscalculated the number of saints that their enemies possessed. Because of this, they didn't hesitate to issue emergency orders. "Retreat as fast as you can, Nevriel," one of the saints shouted. "We will hold them off." The two saints then erected a barrier in order to allow their comrades to escape. "Lux, we need to leave," Nevriel urged while the rest of his soldiers entered the passageway in order to escape. "The barrier will not hold for long." As soon as Nevriel finished his words, a loud crack resounded in the surroundings, and one of the saints that belonged to their side coughed out a mouthful of blood. "Hurry!" Nevriel grabbed Lux's hand and was about to drag him away, but the half-elf didn't budge, puzzling the middle-aged dwarf. At that exact moment, the barrier that was holding back the four saints of Twilight Reign shattered into pieces. "Die, fools!" Magner shouted as he raised his great axe, intending to hack apart the saint who had coughed up blood earlier. However, just as his axe was about to sever the saint's head, It was blocked by another axe. A much bigger axe, held by a bigger man who had blonde hair and blue eyes. "The name is Shaun," Shaun said as he casually pushed Magner back using his axe. "I will teach you the proper way to use an axe." The juggernaut of Agartha smiled evilly as his entire body started to grow in size. Flames snaked around his arm that was holding his axe, making the saints of Twilight Rain feel pressured. Lux helped the injured saint to drink a rejuvenation potion to recover from his injuries. He was confident that Shaun could deal with two saints at once, allowing the two other saints to battle the remaining two enemies on their own. Nevriel, who didn't expect that another saint would appear to help them, stood rooted on the spot. "Let's go, Sir Nevriel," Lux said as he patted the middle-aged dwarf's shoulder. "While the saints are fighting, let's use this opportunity to decimate the elders and executives of Twilight Rain." Lux didn't even wait for Nevriel's reply before he picked up the dwarf and ran towards the passage. There were many other paths aside from the one that they had taken, and they led to the locations of the other top-ranking officials of Twilight Rain. Of course, this was just an excuse. Lux had sent Lazarus and Draven to secretly enter the palace of Twilight Rain in order to rob them of their treasures. Although he would allow the dwarves to get the victory they deserved, he planned to collect his rewards for helping them overcome the trump cards of their enemies. If Nevriel only knew that the half-elf was taking him away from the battlefield so that he wouldn't see his banditry, the middle-aged dwarf would definitely throw a tantrum and give the half-elf the middle finger. Fortunately, he wasn't aware of Lux's plan and was even touched, thinking that the red-headed teenager cared for his safety. While this was happening, Kai and Cephas were also making short work of the enemies they came across within the underground labyrinth. While the top dogs were fighting toe-to-toe in the underground city, the bulk of the members of Twilight Rain and the army of the Kingdom of Guelevin now clashed with each other. Shields broke, weapons shattered, and blood spilled like a river. Everyone fought for what they believed in, and soon, the outcome of the greatest battle within the Kingdom of Guelevin would enter its final stages. "Kill these bastards," Harris commanded as he took the lead to clash against the dwarf army, which had managed to break their first line of defense. Just like their guild master, Harris was confident of winning the war, thinking that they had more saints on their side. Little did he know, his guild master was currently dealing with a powerful saint who hailed from the kingdom of Agartha. Shaun, whom Lux had summoned to deal with the leader of the Dark Guild, was having the time of his life, fighting against two saints at the same time. The guildmaster and the vice-guildmaster of Twilight Rain were both axe users. As someone wielding the same weapon, Shaun wanted to show his two enemies that, even if they teamed up to fight against him, he would still emerge victorious. The two dwarf saints from the Kingdom of Guelevin were busy dealing with the other two saints who belonged to Twilight Rain. The dwarf saints were evenly matched against their opponent, leading to a stalemate in the central region of Twilight Rain's headquarters. Of course, Harris didn't know this. He simply fought against the enemies that were right in front of him and massacred as many people as he could. As a brawler, Harris was in his element when he was deep behind enemy lines. Anyone within the reach of his fists and feet would find themselves hard-pressed to defend against the high-ranker, who was currently in a frenzy. Harris was similar to Shaun and Eiko. They were all battle junkies and enjoyed fighting more than negotiating with their foes. Just as Harris was about to kill one of the captains of the dwarf army, he sensed a presence, about to attack him from the side. The brawler immediately raised his wrist guards to block the incoming attack and planted his feet firmly to the ground. Lux recognized Harris and locked onto the other party's position, initiating a sneak attack while the latter was busy dealing with the captain of the dwarf army. The half-elf's foot collided with the wrist guard, sending Harris skidding several meters across the ground. However, the brawler was unhurt from the exchange and looked at the one who attacked him with surprise. "It's you," Harris shouted. "You finally showed yourself, Randolph." /in. When Lux fought Harris for the first time, he introduced himself as Randolph. This made his dwarven master very annoyed with him because his ungrateful disciple was stirring up trouble using his name. "Yes, it is I," Lux replied. He didn't even bother to correct the misunderstanding he caused long ago. For him, it didn't really matter whether Harris called him Randolph, Rudolph, or Santa. Before this day was over, he would be laughing, "Ho ho ho," because he had long wanted to settle his score with the brawler, who currently had the same rank as him. Lux was currently an A ranker just like Harris. However, there was a big difference between them. Harris was a battle-hardened warrior, specializing in melee combat. On the other hand, the half-elf was an all-rounder, making the dwarf stronger than him when it came to one-on-one battles. Even so, Lux decided to settle the score with the brawler using his own method. "You will not escape me this time, Randolph," Harris shouted. "I will make you pay for what you did back then." Lux didn't say anything and simply made the "come and get me" gesture with his right hand. The brawler then roared as he jumped towards the half-elf with his fists blazing with furious flames. The half-elf summoned Calypso, who immediately clashed against Harris, blocking his blow. "You are up to your tricks again," Harris bellowed before clashing with Calypso again. "The only thing you are good at is hiding behind people. Fight me like a man if you dare." At first, the brawler thought that he could easily overpower Calypso. But after their first exchange, he found out that the living armor wasn't a pushover and was effectively blocking his attacks with its metallic body. While this was happening, Lux would occasionally throw a bone spear, forcing Harris to dodge to the side and accept one of Calypso's counterattacks. The half-elf's attacks were so precise that it annoyed the hell out of the dwarf, who wanted nothing more than to rip the red-headed teenager's body apart. Lux snickered internally, having fun with purposely toying with his enemy. Back then, Harris was someone who could easily defeat him with a single slap of his hand. But now, Lux wouldn't even need to lift a finger to turn the arrogant brawler into meat paste, courtesy of one of his calamity-ranked monsters. However, he decided not to do that. He planned to annoy the dwarf high ranker until Harris puked blood out of sheer frustration for not being able to punch the devilish smile off of Lux's face. As the battle progressed, the dwarf found himself being slowly pushed back by the half-elf and his summon, who were working in tandem to land blows on his body. Nevriel, who was paying attention to Lux's battle, couldn't help but be surprised because the half-elf had grown stronger and improved a lot since the last time he saw him fight. Seeing that the red-headed teenager didn't need any help, Nevriel focused his attention on commanding his troops to decimate the high rankers of the opposing side. Lux, who didn't want his side to suffer too many casualties, summoned Diablo, Ishtar, Pazuzu, Revan, Zagan, and Shax to target the enemy high rankers. He had also summoned the Doom Knight gangbangers and the Fortress Defenders to help the Vanguard push their enemies back. With such a powerful lineup, the forces of Twilight Reign found themselves unable to mount an effective counterattack due to the undead monsters, who didn't fear death. Soon, Harris found himself surrounded on all sides, with a few Fortress Defenders blocking his path of escape. The brawler almost puked out blood when he saw Lux calmly sipping a cup of tea while casting dark bullets in his direction. Reaching the limit of his anger, Harris' body turned completely red as he activated his Berserk ability, raising all of his stats by 300%. He then charged towards Calypso and threw a punch at her face. Calypso hurriedly assumed a defensive position to block the attack. However, the brawler used a feint to trick her into that position. Using this opportunity, Harris ran past Calypso and reappeared 2 meters away from the half-elf, whom he wanted to kill. He knew that he only had one chance to overturn the situation. Because of this, he didn't hesitate to unleash his strongest attack that would end his enemy's life once and for all. Lux didn't even look in the dwarf's direction and continued to drink his tea. Despite the fact that Harris had thrown caution in the air and used his strongest attack, the half-elf remained indifferent. "Die!" Harris roared as he threw the punch containing all of his strength. Just before his attack reached his target, a giant shield smashed against the side of his body, sending him smashing towards the wall of the cavern. Lux's corpse god had materialized to defend his master from harm, using its shield to bash Harris away. The current Lux didn't really need to lift a finger to deal with the brawler because his subordinates were already enough to deal with him. He simply wanted to make the high ranker think that he had a chance of winning against him, so he acted the way he did, allowing Harris to get near him. Lowering his teacup to the small table beside him, Lux raised his hand and Calypso transformed into the Spear of Longinus. The half-elf stood up and pulled back his arm while aiming the tip of the spear at the dwarf, who had propped himself up from the ground while looking at him in disbelief. "Pierce through the void," Lux said with a sneer. "Spear of Longinus." The divine weapon blazed in golden flames as it flew towards its target with the force of a rail gun. Harris roared as he punched forward, using all the strength that remained in his body. He knew that if he didn't do this, he would definitely die from the might of the attack that was headed in his direction. A powerful explosion shook the underground base as Harris' fist clashed against the tip of the spear of Longinus. But a second later, the spear pierced through the brawler's fist, completely disintegrating Harris' right arm in the blink of an eye. His pained cry spread into the surroundings, bringing despair to his allies, who were hoping that one of their elders would be able to turn the tide of battle in their favor. Unfortunately for them, Lux had been toying with them from the very start. Seeing Harris' pitiful state, Lux stopped playing. With a snap of his finger, an earth spike pierced through the brawler's chest. The blow was an inch away from his heart, but it wouldn't change the fact that it was still a fatal blow that would make the dwarf bleed to death. "I don't really need any A rankers right now, but I will make an exception just for you," Lux said with a smile. "Rejoice, Harris. You will now become a subordinate of the very person you wish to kill." Harris wanted to tell the half-elf that he would never get his way, but instead of words, only blood came out of his mouth. A moment later, a black coffin appeared in front of Harris, which made the brawler's body uncontrollably shudder. His instincts were screaming at him that he mustn't let himself be taken by the black coffin, whose lid had already slid open. Unfortunately, Harris didn't have any strength in his body to resist the shadowy hands that grabbed hold of him. He could only watch in horror when he saw countless faces within the darkness of the black coffin, all laughing and looking at him with anticipation. They were the people and monsters that Blackfire had devoured after it became a divine artifact, and they were very happy to see that another comrade would be joining them in their eternal suffering. A soundless scream filled with horror escaped Harris' lips as his entire body was devoured by Blackfire. Similar to Lux, the black coffin now had higher standards and preferred to capture saints, supremes, calamity, and demigods. However, it didn't mind taking Harris as one of its master's slaves. After all, tormenting those who wished for its master's demise was Blackfire's favorite pastime. It had given the Oracle of Light plenty of attention after it had devoured her. Not only did Maeve's body and soul suffer under Lux's hands, but Blackfire also didn't hold back in torturing her inside its personal domain. The black coffin thoroughly enjoyed converting the Oracle to become its master's most loyal slave, using abyssal flames to torture her soul and break the last vestiges of her resistance. The current Maeve would now live and die for the sake of her new master. Even if Lux ordered her to parade herself naked through the kingdoms that were once allied with the Divine Army, the Oracle would happily do it without a second thought. For Maeve, Lux giving her orders was the greatest form of happiness that she could achieve in her new life. As long as she was useful to her master, she would be willing to do anything. Even if the latter were to use her as a chair or a bed warmer, Maeve would do her best to fulfill her role without fail. If the founder and the sovereign of the Divine Army could see her now, they would only shake their heads bitterly due to what she had become. The once proud lady, who thought that everything under the heavens was in the palm of her hands, was now reduced to being a tool by the very person whom she wanted to kill with every fiber of her being. The half-elf glanced at the remaining members of Twilight Reign, who were still visibly shaken by what happened to one of their strongest elders. Lazarus and Draven have finished looting the treasury of Twilight Reign. Lux mused after hearing the report of his two subordinates. Time to finally end this battle. The half-elf raised his hand and smirked. Arise. Nevriel, who was forced to retreat after two high-rankers had teamed up against him, suddenly felt several powerful presences appear where Lux was currently at. You don't feel like playing anymore? Avernus asked in a teasing tone. The Dracolic was currently in his demi-dragon form, releasing a pressure that made the faces of the members of Twilight Reign turn as pale as a candle. Yes, Lux replied. Time to end this farce. Fine. The Dracolic smirked as he walked towards the pitiful rankers of Twilight Reign, who found themselves looking at an existence that they never expected would make an appearance in their battle against the forces of the kingdom of Guelevin. Avernus, the black ogre, and the golden-eyed Naga all sneered at the lowly creatures who were about to meet their doom. Soon, the sounds of dying screams reverberated within the underground base. Nevriel and the dwarf army looked at the three calamity-ranked monsters in horror as they began their one-sided massacre. The middle-aged dwarf then looked at the half-elf, who had his arms crossed over his chest. As if sensing his gaze, Lux glanced in Nevriel's direction and winked at the dwarf, making the latter's body shudder uncontrollably. Truth be told, Nevriel was planning to demand that Lux return his 10 million gold coins, which the half-elf had swindled from him. The middle-aged dwarf then forced an awkward smile to appear on his face before winking back at the half-elf. This, in turn, made Lux's body uncontrollably shudder. The impact of the wink that came from a middle-aged dwarf who had an awkward smile on his face made the half-elf feel as if his chastity was in danger. Fortunately, he had already given his chastity to his fiancée, Iris, and no longer had to worry about Nevriel's attempt to flirt with him. If the dwarf only knew what Lux was thinking, he might have gone batshit crazy out of anger and thrown caution into the wind. It was a good thing that neither of them knew what the other was thinking, so the two of them only chuckled as if coming to an understanding. While this was happening, Kai, Cephas, Keen, Gerhardt, Cleo, and Maeve had also finished cleaning up the forces of Twilight Rain on their side. With the resistance of Twilight Rain steadily growing weaker, all of the forces made their way towards the underground city, where the Seven Saints were still duking it out with each other. Scarlet and Sean, Sid's friend, fought side by side as they retreated with the other members of Twilight Rain toward their inner city, where their leaders were currently at. The two only dealt non-lethal injuries to their opponents, using daggers coated with powerful paralyzing agents that would make their foes unable to move for a few minutes. Both of them had to make it look like they were seriously trying their best to kill their enemies while making sure that none of them died. At the end of the day, they were the half-elf's double agents, and killing the rankers from the kingdom of Guelevin wouldn't do them any good. All the manpower of Twilight Rain had been recalled from their missions in order to reinforce the main headquarters. The pro of this strategy was that they were able to resist the full might of the kingdom of Guelevin. The con was that all of them were confined in the same place, and they would never be able to escape if the enemies managed to overpower their defenses, and that was precisely their situation at that very moment. Of course, just like Harris, all of them believed that they would still have the upper hand in the battle. After all, from what they knew, they had more saints than their enemies. But this confidence disappeared the moment they arrived at their inner city and saw the battle between the saints that was now heating up. The Guildmaster and Vice-Guildmaster of Twilight Rain glanced in the direction of their subordinates and frowned. They have been pushed all this way? Magnar thought before focusing his attention back on the juggernaut of Agartha, whose blows were as heavy as a mountain. The Vice-Guildmaster shared Magnar's worries. If this same scenario had happened an hour ago, they would have easily dealt with the army of the kingdom of Guelevin. But now, they were unable to do anything because another saint had appeared out of nowhere to help their enemies. The worst part of it all was that Shaun was actually only a step away from becoming a supreme, making him a pseudo-supreme. This meant that he was more powerful than an ordinary saint. Although he was facing the two strongest saints of Twilight Rain, his enemies could only hold him back if they worked together. Just as Magnar thought that things couldn't get any worse than their current situation, Kai's group emerged from one of the passageways that led to the inner city. "Are you ready, weaklings of Twilight Rain?" Kai shouted with arrogance. "I, Kai, have come to stomp you all with my hoof. Remember my name when all of you visit the afterlife. Filthy lowlanders. I, Cephas, have come as well." Cephas declared, "I will give you all a chance to kneel and beg for mercy. Those who do so will gain the right to become my slaves. Death or slavery, choose wisely." The two arrogant troublemakers stood like second-generation rich young masters who were only able to do anything with impunity due to the two saints guarding their backs. If it wasn't for Cleo and Maeve, the two would have already left the headquarters of Twilight Rain with their tails tucked between their legs. The appearance of two more saints broke the balance of the battle, forcing the four saints of Twilight Reign to distance themselves from their opponents in order to regroup. This is bad, Magner thought. So those two saints were the reason our forces have been pushed back this far. The Guildmaster of Twilight Reign assumed that Cleo and Maeve were the main reason why they lost the initiative of the battle. However, he instantly knew that his assumptions were wrong when he felt three other strong presences arrive in the inner city. Avernus, the Black Ogre, and the golden-eyed Naga appeared like the big shots that they were, and stared at the countless members of Twilight Reign, who no longer had a place to run. Nevriel, who had also returned to the inner city, couldn't help but look in surprise upon seeing Cleo and Maeve in the distance. Just how many saints does this brat have as his subordinates? Nevriel thought. Deep inside, he was truly shaken by the number of powerful individuals who were willing to obey Lux. His body subconsciously shuddered at the thought of Lux becoming their enemy. If the half-elf decided to stab the kingdom of Guelevin in the back, he would easily be able to do it due to how powerful his lineup was. 3 peak calamity-ranked monsters and 3 saints. Lux's undead army was not yet included in this number, and Nevriel had a feeling that the red-headed teenager was still hiding his full strength. Hypothetically, even if all the rankers and high rankers of their kingdom fought alongside their saints, the outcome of the battle was already decided before it even began. I need to report this to His Majesty, Nevriel pledged in his heart. Lux must never become our enemy no matter what. Fortunately, Princess Anastasia has a good relationship with him. Maybe we can make him one of our kingdom's protectors in exchange for her hand in marriage. The king's right-hand man was busy thinking of possible scenarios that would help them forge stronger ties with the half-elf, who had become an overlord in his eyes. Magner and his vice-guildmaster exchanged a glance. Since it had already come to this, there was only one thing that they could do, and that was to escape. As long as they lived, they were confident that they would be able to rebuild their organization from scratch. It might take 3 to 4 decades to regain their organization's peak strength, but as long as they were alive, they would still be able to realize their goal. This time, they would no longer focus on the kingdom of Guelevin and would extend their reach to their neighbors. Even if he had to shake hands with those who were eyeing the Dwarven kingdom with greed, he would do it as long as he became its king. Magner and his vice-guildmaster both took a tablet out of their storage rings. This was an artifact that would allow them to teleport to a location that they had prepared beforehand. A safe place where no one would be able to find them. Today, you win, Magner shouted in anger. But in the future, it will be my turn to win. Tell your damnable king to wash his neck, because I will definitely take the throne away from him. Without another word, Magner decisively broke the tablet to allow himself to escape. The tablet crumbled into pieces, but Magner remained where he was, making him frown. His vice-guildmaster had the same expression on his face, which made the two of them feel that something had gone terribly wrong. Planning to escape? A teasing tone reached everyone's ears. The members of Twilight Reign and their 4 saints glanced in the direction where the voice had come from. There, they saw a half-elf with a devilish smile, looking down on all of them with an amused expression on his face. You really thought that you could escape, huh? Lux sneered. Sorry, but you're not going anywhere, mister. As soon as Lux finished talking, a beautiful fox lady appeared behind him and gave him a hug. I have locked the space within this area, Hannah said softly. No one will be able to leave without my permission. Lux nodded. You heard her. None of you are going anywhere. Twilight Reign's ambition ends here. Junior, you dare? Magner roared in anger as he charged towards Lux with a crazed look on his face. He had painstakingly built up his organization from scratch. They only needed 1 more year at most to set their plan in motion, and the crown of the Dwarf Kingdom would fall into his hands. However, this dream of his shattered in the face of the sudden variables that had appeared before him. They never learn, Hannah sighed before snapping her fingers. A moment later, the space around Magner distorted, making him scream in pain. It was as if his body was being stabbed by invisible blades, bringing him excruciating pain. But Lux wasn't satisfied with this. He raised his hand and pointed in Magner's direction before using a skill that would further make the Guildmaster of Twilight Reign suffer. Finger of Death. A red lightning bolt erupted from the tip of Lux's hand and collided with Magnur's chest, making the latter scream as if his very soul was being burned in the flames of hell.
Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe.